My name is Sarah. I'm 16 years old. And the night my life burned down started with one sentence. My mom kicked me out at 16. You'll be back begging in a month. My dad slammed the door in my face. I walked away. I never looked back. But 11 years later, my phone lit up. 99 missed calls. They were begging me to pick up. Back then, I was just a kid with pain on my fingers and stupid hope in my chest. I'd just been accepted into a prestigious art school on the other side of the city, the kind of place people like me only ever see on brochures. I came home clutching the letter like a lifeline, thinking my parents would finally see me. Instead, my mom read the words School of Fine Arts and laughed without any humor. You think smearing colors on a canvas is a future? Absolutely not. She shredded the envelope right in front of me. Little white flakes raining to the floor while my stomach turned to ice. My dad didn't even sit down. He stepped closer, jabbing a finger at the portfolio I'd spent years building. You either enroll in pre-med like we planned or you're on your own. No house, no money, no family. Choose. My cheeks burned. My hands shook so hard I had to clench my fist to keep them from showing it. Then, I'm on my own, I heard myself say, even though every survival instinct screamed at me to back down. His eyes went dead cold. Good. Pack your junk. You'll be back begging in a month. He yanked the front door open so violently the frame rattled, then slammed it behind me as I stepped out with one old backpack and a sketchbook pressed to my chest. I walked down that dark street, feeling my childhood snap behind me like a cut wire. I swore I would rather starve than crawl back. I didn't know that someday the begging would come from them. Before I tell you what he said and what happened after I walked out, tell me what time is it for you right now and where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. I'm Sarah, 16, standing on a cracked sidewalk with a backpack and a portfolio. And the only thing I own that feels like a future is a folded acceptance letter my parents tried to destroy. That night, I crashed on a friend's couch, but my mind wasn't with the blankets or the borrowed pillow. It was inside a painting I hadn't even created yet. In my head, I saw a girl reaching for a door while two faceless figures towered behind her, their hands stained with the ashes of burned canvases. That image wouldn't leave me alone. When I finally stepped onto campus a week later, sleep-deprived, terrified, and technically homeless, I felt something strange. Not safety, but possibility. The studio smelled like acrylic and turpentine, and for the first time in my life, no one told me art was a waste. I scraped together my savings, paid the first month of a tiny shared room near school, and picked up shifts at a dingy late-night diner. During the day, I painted until my fingers cramped. At night, I scrubbed tables and pretended my feet weren't killing me. The exhaustion was brutal, but it still felt better than suffocating in that house. The first real human warmth I felt came from a fellow student in my foundations class. A boy with wild curls and paint permanently under his nails. He looked at my first assignment, a rough charcoal sketch of that faceless pair of parents, and whistled softly. "There's anger in this," he said. "Real anger. Don't lose that." I didn't realize it then, but that comment would become the seed of something darker. Revenge art. That week, I woke up from a nightmare drenched in sweat. In the dream, my mom had taken every canvas I ever painted and fed them one by one into a fireplace, smiling while the colors curled and blackened. I jolted upright, grabbed my sketchbook, and started drawing the scene exactly as I'd seen it. My hands reaching into the flames, her face warped with satisfaction. The next day, I turned that sketch into a painting. Every brush stroke felt like a scream I'd never been allowed to let out. That piece, half confession, half accusation, got attention. Professors lingered in front of it. Students whispered, "This is raw." One of them said, "Who hurt you?" I just smiled thinly and kept painting. I wasn't ready to answer that out loud. Money was still a constant problem. My parents had cut me off completely. No calls, no messages, nothing but a silent block. When tuition came due for the next term, I stood in the financial aid office, shaking only to find out my scholarship application had been mysteriously withdrawn from the online portal. I hadn't withdrawn anything. I changed my password and stared at the screen in disbelief. Later, I heard from a sympathetic clerk that someone had called pretending to be me and corrected my plans, saying I decided not to pursue art after all. There were only 2 people who would benefit from that. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. If they thought sabotaging my future from a distance would send me crawling home, they didn't know me at all. I picked up more shifts. I sold sketches on the street. I painted until my eyes blurred. At 3 o'clock in the morning, when the loneliness crept in and the room felt too quiet, one question kept circling in my mind like a vulture. Would you dare walk away from everything you've ever known, even if you knew the loneliness would chew on you every night? By the time the mid-year student exhibition rolled around, I'd turned my anger into a series. 3 large canvases. A child offering a glowing painting to 2 shadowy adults. The adults tearing it in half. The child walking away, clutching the torn pieces like armor. My mentor pushed me to submit them as a set. People need to see this story, she said. It's ugly and honest. That's what good art is. The night of the showcase, the gallery buzzed with chatter, cheap wine, and the click of expensive shoes on polished concrete. I stood by my series, palms damp, pretending I wasn't watching every reaction like my life depended on it. Some people stared in silence, others leaned in, reading the small title card, Inheritance. A boy I'd seen around nodded at me. Who are they? He asked, pointing at the shadow figures. My parents, I said simply. He laughed awkwardly, thinking I was joking. I didn't correct him. As the room filled, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Unknown number. I ignored it, then again and again. I silenced it, forcing myself to focus. That was when I felt it, the shift in the air. The kind of quiet that isn't silence, but tension pulling tight like a wire. I looked toward the entrance, and almost stopped breathing. My mother was standing in the doorway, dressed like she was attending a corporate gala, eyes sweeping the room with that familiar mix of judgment and calculation. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating some stress-induced mirage. But then her gaze locked onto my series. Her face hardened. She moved toward my work with slow, deliberate steps. The crowd parted around her like they could sense the storm. What is this? She hissed when she reached my corner, her voice low but laced with venom. Is this how you portray us? As monsters? Heat rushed to my face, but I didn't look away. If the shoe fits. Her eyes flashed. She stepped closer to the nearest painting, the one where the adults shred the child's work, and lifted her hand like she wanted to rip the canvas right off the wall. For a heartbeat, I was back in my parents' living room, watching my father snap my sketchbook in half and toss it into the trash while my mother said, "You'll thank us for this someday." My stomach twisted so violently, I thought I'd be sick. Don't, I said, my voice steady, even though my pulse roared in my ears. Touching the work is against gallery rules. People had started to form a semicircle around us. Whispers fluttered through the air. She seemed to finally notice the audience. Her lips curled into a brittle smile, but her eyes stayed sharp. This is what you've been doing. Painting our family drama for strangers? You are embarrassing us. You embarrassed yourself, I replied quietly. I'm just documenting it. Before she could answer, Corey appeared at my side like he'd been summoned by the tension. Sorry, he said politely but firmly, looking at my mother. You can disagree all you want, but you don't get to threaten the art. Her work is one of the strongest pieces in this gallery. People nearby nodded. Someone muttered, "She's incredible," just loud enough for my mother to hear. My mom's cheeks flushed an ugly red. She straightened her posture, trying to reclaim control. Well, enjoy your little show, she sneered. We'll see where this art gets you when you're broke and alone. She spun on her heel and marched out, her heels hammering the floor. The door swung shut behind her with a soft thud that sounded far too much like the night my dad had slammed it in my face. After she left, something unexpected happened. A small crowd gravitated toward my series, whispering about the confrontation they'd just witnessed. A local blogger asked if he could feature the paintings and the story behind them. Invitations for smaller exhibits followed. The humiliation she tried to throw over me like a net had slipped, landing squarely on her instead. I looked at the empty doorway and felt something twist inside me. Not sadness, not fear, but a cold, sharp resolve. If my parents insisted on turning my life into a battlefield, I would make sure every wound left a mark they couldn't scrub off their reputation. When the applause for the evening's award started a few minutes later, and I heard my name called for Most Impactful Series, a question echoed in my mind louder than the clapping. When the people who are supposed to love you turn their backs, would you choose to forgive them or let your success slice back in their direction? After the exhibition, life didn't magically get easier. The tiny cash prize barely covered a month's rent, and my parents' rage escalated in all the ways that didn't leave bruises, but left scars. Anyway, first came the emails, long, furious paragraphs about how I was smearing the family name and using trauma as a cheap marketing trick. I blocked them. Then came the calls from relatives repeating my parents' version of the story, that I had run away, that I was sick, that I was being manipulated by bad influences. One aunt even sent a voice message saying my art was demonic. I laughed so I wouldn't cry. The worst hit came a few months later. I was walking back from the night shift at the diner when a police car rolled slowly up beside me. My throat tightened. The officer stepped out and asked my name, then said they'd received a report of a missing minor believed to be in danger. That minor was me. That concern was my parents trying to drag me home in handcuffs like I was property. At the station, after what felt like hours of questions, an officer finally slid a paper across the table for me to sign, acknowledging that I was safe, enrolled in school, working, and under no threat. Legally, they couldn't force me home. The report would be closed. The officer gave me a sympathetic look as I signed. Some parents don't know when to let go, he murmured. I walked out into the night air, hands trembling, fury boiling just under my skin. They had tried to paint me as helpless, unstable, incapable. Fine, I thought. Then I'll paint you exactly as you are. That night, I opened my journal, a battered notebook filled with unfinished sketches and angry scribbles, and began to write like a confession to my future self. I described every manipulation, every threat, every burned sketch and shredded canvas. I taped in old photos, my dad throwing away my art supplies, my mom tearing up a drawing she'd found under my pillow. I didn't know why, but it felt important to document it all, like evidence. A month later, a flyer appeared on the school bulletin board, a regional competition themed Truth and Consequences, sponsored by a major gallery. The winner would receive a sizable grant and a chance to show their work to serious collectors. The phrase truth and consequences buzzed in my mind. I knew exactly which truth I wanted to put on a wall. I designed a piece that terrified even me, a towering, distorted family portrait. The parents' faces were photorealistic, recognizable to anyone who knew them, but cracked down the middle like shattered porcelain. Behind them, instead of a home, loomed a courtroom, a hospital, and a house with foreclosure signs. Images of the future I wished on them each time they said I'd come crawling back. The child in the painting, me, turned her back on the frame entirely, walking toward a blank canvas that glowed like a doorway out. I painted until my fingers ached and my vision blurred. During breaks, I reread my journal entries, letting the memories sting so I could drag that pain onto the canvas. One evening, my phone lit up with my mother's name. Against my better judgment, I answered. "We heard you caused a scene with the police," she began without greeting. "Do you know how that makes us look? People think we don't care about our own daughter." I laughed bitterly. "You care a lot about how you look, not so much about me." There was a pause on the line. Then my father's voice came through, harsh and sharp. "You're still our responsibility until you're 18. Come home, and we'll fix this. Drop the art nonsense. Enroll in real classes, and we'll pretend this phase never happened." Something inside me snapped cleanly like a rope cut with a knife. "No," I said quietly. "You taught me that choices have consequences. Now it's your turn." I hung up before they could respond. My hands shook, but not from fear. From adrenaline and the fierce clarity of someone who has finally chosen themselves. Staring at the half-finished painting, I knew there was no going back. I would enter the competition. I would tell the truth on canvas, even if it shattered whatever was left of our relationship. As I layered more paint, another question rose in my chest, heavy and sharp. If the same people who pushed you to the edge suddenly asked for forgiveness, would you give it to them or let them live with the fallout they created? The weeks before the regional competition bled together in a blur of paint, coffee, and missed sleep. Every stroke on the canvas felt like I was carving my history into stone. Professors stopped by my easel and lingered. One of them, a notoriously harsh critic, stared at the family portrait for a long time before saying, "This is uncomfortable to look at. That means it matters." His words lodged in my chest like a strange kind of comfort. Then came the message that made my stomach drop. My mother wanted to meet, to talk about the disaster you're about to cause. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Not because I wanted approval, but because part of me wanted to see the fear in her eyes. We met at a quiet cafe far from campus. As she walked in, I noticed the differences immediately. The lines around her mouth had deepened. There was a tightness in her shoulders I'd never seen before. Her hair, once perfectly styled, was pulled back in a rushed bun. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. "Sarah," she said, sitting down across from me. No hug, no smile, just my name. "I saw the flyer. Your school posted your entry online. Do you have any idea what that painting will do to us?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch. "You mean what it will do to your reputation?" I corrected. "My life is already done being controlled by you." Her jaw clenched. "You're making us look like monsters. People at church, at work." She stopped herself, glancing away. That slip told me more than she meant to. I leaned forward. "What happened at work?" Her eyes snapped back to mine, anger and something like panic flickering there. "Nothing you need to worry about." Which meant everything had gone wrong. Later, through a cousin who still secretly texted me, I learned the story. My mother had bragged for years about her perfect daughter headed for medical school. When the truth came out that I'd been kicked out and cut off for choosing art, whispers started. A coworker whose kid went to my art school had seen the Inheritance series online and recognized my mother's face in the shadows. Word spread. Complaints were made about her unprofessional behavior when she ranted about ungrateful children at work. She was quietly demoted. Her perfect image had cracked. Sitting across from her now, watching the tremor in her hand as she lifted her cup, I felt a dark satisfaction curl in my chest. "Consequences. They think I'm a bad mother," she said, voice low. "They don't understand the sacrifices I made. You set fire to my dreams and then got surprised when the smoke showed," I replied. Her gaze snapped to me, wounded. "I did what I thought was best. I wanted stability for you, a real career." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You wanted control. There's a difference." For a moment, the mask slipped. I saw not the cold, demanding woman I grew up with, but a tired, frightened human whose carefully curated life was falling apart. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The words so soft I almost missed them. "I didn't think it would. I didn't think you'd actually leave." Anger flared. "You told me I'd be back begging in a month." Her eyes filled with tears. "I was wrong." Her voice cracked. "Do you want me to say I was wrong? Fine, I was. But that painting, it will destroy whatever respect we have left. Your father's business depends on that image, our finances." There it was. The real reason, not my pain, their money. I sat back, letting the realization sink in. "So, you're not here to understand me," I said quietly. "You're here to ask me to protect you again." She swallowed, unable to deny it. "You could paint something else," she said. "Something less personal. If you pull that piece from the competition, your father and I can help you. We can pay your tuition. We can fix the scholarship issues. We can make this right." The offer hovered between us like a poisonous flower. Safety, stability on the condition that I erase the truth. I looked at her and saw flashes of memory. Her ripping up my first painting. Her standing silent while my dad told me to get out. Her calling the police instead of calling to ask if I was okay. "You're not trying to make this right," I said finally. "You're trying to rewind to a version of me that doesn't exist anymore." She flinched. For a moment, the cafe noise faded, and it was just us, mother and daughter, balancing on the edge of a choice that would decide everything. "You want to know what kind of mother you are?" I asked softly. "You are the reason my art has teeth." I stood, sliding my chair back. "I'm not pulling the painting." She stared up at me, eyes shining with a mix of fury and hurt. "If you do this, don't come to us when it all falls apart." I almost laughed. "You already made sure there was nowhere to come back to." As I walked out of the cafe, my hands trembled. Not from fear, but from the raw power of finally refusing to be bought. One thought echoed in my mind like a drum beat. Can a single apology ever erase years of being told that your dreams were worthless? Or is there a point where sorry comes too late to matter? The week of the regional competition felt like standing in the eye of a storm, unnaturally calm, with chaos swirling just out of sight. I barely slept, but this time it wasn't from doubt. It was from the adrenaline of someone about to light a match in a room full of dry paper. The competition venue was massive, a converted warehouse with high ceilings and white walls that made every color scream. My piece, Truth and Consequences, hung on a central wall, impossible to miss. The towering cracked faces of my parents watched over the room like broken saints in a stained glass window. The foreclosure signs and hospital corridors behind them drawn with ruthless precision. The walking away child glowed at the edge of the frame, heading toward that bright blank canvas. During setup, I ran my fingers lightly along the dried paint, remembering the nights I'd painted until my hands went numb. I'd hidden small details in the work, subtle references only people who knew our family would catch. My father's watch, my mother's favorite necklace, the engraved plaque from his once thriving business, now splintered and half buried in the background. This wasn't just art. It was a testimony. The morning of the opening, my inbox pinged with an email from my father, a cold block of text threatening legal action if I continued to defame this family. I forwarded it to my professor, who forwarded it to the competition organizers. A succinct reply came back. "Artistic expression is protected. We stand by our artists." For the first time in my life, adults with power were standing on my side instead of against me. When the doors finally opened to the public, the room flooded with people, critics, local news, collectors, students. I kept my distance at first, watching from a corner as they approached my piece. Faces shifted, curiosity, discomfort, fascination. Someone murmured, "That's brutal," sounding almost impressed. I saw a woman snap a photo, then another of the name tag below, Sarah Tran, age 16. My age became part of the shock. Then I saw them. My parents entered together, dressed as if they were going to a gala instead of a trial they didn't know they were on. My father's jaw was already set, shoulders stiff. My mother's eyes darted nervously around the room until they landed on the painting. I watched the exact moment recognition hit. Their steps faltered. My father's face went from confusion to fury in seconds. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. They stood there frozen in front of a larger-than-life reflection of their worst selves. A few people nearby realized who they were. Whispers started, sharp and quick. A man I recognized as a local journalist raised his eyebrows, glancing between the canvas and my parents like he'd just stumbled into the story of the year. My father turned, searching the crowd, and found me. Our eyes locked. For a heartbeat, the room fell away. "Take it down," he hissed when he reached me, his voice low but shaking.
"Now."
I met his glare evenly.
"No."
His face went red. "This is slander." "It's a painting," I said calmly. "But if you want to talk about the real events behind it, I have a journal full of dates, details, and witnesses. We can take that to court if you'd like. Truth and consequences, remember?" His mouth opened, then closed. For once, he had no immediate comeback. My mother hovered behind him, eyes glazed with something like panic. "Sarah, please," she whispered. "We're all ready. Things are bad. The business is struggling." People stopped trusting her father after those rumors at work, after the police thing, after your little series went around online. This will ruin us. The words hit me, but not the way she meant them to. All those years they'd told me I'd fail without them, that I was nothing on my own, and now my art had the power to ruin them. I felt both powerful and strangely sad. You did that to yourselves, I said quietly. I just painted what happened. The judges called everyone to attention for the awards. My heart hammered against my ribs as they listed honorable mentions. Then third place, second. When they announced the grand prize winner, I heard my name. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Then the applause crashed over me, and the room seemed to tilt. I walked to the front, legs unsteady, vision tunneling as I accepted the certificate and the envelope with the grant check inside. Flashbulbs popped. Someone asked me to say a few words. I stepped up to the mic, fingers gripping the edge of the podium. My parents stood at the back of the room, small and tense beneath their own cracked faces. This piece is about what happens, I said, voice steady, when the people who are supposed to protect you become the ones who break you instead. When they care more about their image than your happiness. Sometimes the only way to survive is to tell the truth so loudly it drowns out their lies. A hush fell. I took a breath. To everyone who was told their dreams were a phase or a disappointment or a waste of potential, this is for you. The applause this time felt different. Not just polite, but thunderous, like something inside the room had shifted. I stepped down and, for the first time, didn't look for my parents' reaction. I didn't need it. That day, a local news segment ran a story about the teenage artist whose parents tried to silence her truth. Clients quietly stopped calling my father. My mother withdrew even more at work. Their world began to crumble, bit by bit, under the weight of consequences they'd tried so hard to avoid. As I packed up my supplies that night, exhausted but strangely calm, one question lingered in my mind, aimed not just at me, but at anyone listening. When success finally finds you after years of being crushed, will you use it to heal yourself or to make sure those who hurt you feel every ounce of the pain they caused? 11 years later, I was 27, and my phone lit up on my studio table. 99 missed calls from the same number. The number I had muted, then blocked, then unblocked, so I could see it and choose not to answer. My parents' house line. The words from that night when I was 16 echoed in my head like a recording I couldn't erase. You'll be back begging in a month. I glanced up at the wall in front of me where a much newer painting hung. It was part of a series that had toured 3 countries, written about in magazines, studied in art classes. This one showed a phone exploding with light. 99 missed calls glowing across the screen. In the reflection on the glass surface, you could just make out a pair of older, desperate faces, blurred but unmistakable. Behind the phone, the silhouette of a woman stood at an open window looking out at a city instead of back at the ringing device. That woman was me. My career had taken off after the competition. The grant paid for the rest of art school. Commissions followed. I taught workshops, sold prints, signed with a gallery that understood I wasn't just painting pretty pictures. I was painting survival. People who grew up like I did saw themselves in my work and wrote to me from all over the world. Meanwhile, my parents' life followed the path I had imagined in that brutal portrait years ago. The whispers became public. Clients abandoned my father's business after the article about the missing daughter and the silenced artist went viral. A bad investment tipped them over the edge. The house I'd grown up in was sold to cover debts. They moved into a cramped apartment far from the manicured neighborhood they once bragged about. I learned these details not because I went looking but because the internet never forgets, and our hometown loved gossip. The first time my mother called, after years of silence, I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was smaller, frayed. "Sarah, we're not doing well. Your father's health. We could really use your help. Just call me back, please." I didn't. Not then. Instead, I went to my studio and painted, channeling the complicated knot of pity and rage into color. It wasn't simple hatred anymore. It was heavier, more tangled, anger laced with the memory of being a 16-year-old girl on a cold sidewalk with nowhere to go. Now, on this ordinary Tuesday, the screen screamed 99 missed calls. My chest felt tight, breath short. Not from fear, but from the weight of what picking up or not picking up would mean. I let it ring one more time. Then finally, for the first time in years, I answered. Silence crackled on the line for 2 seconds. Then my mother's voice came through, raw and hoarse. Sarah? I could hear noise in the background. Hospital monitors, distant announcements. We've been trying to reach you. I noticed, I said, keeping my tone neutral. What do you want? There was a pause, then my father's voice, weaker than I'd ever heard it. We need help. The medical bills, the debts, we're losing everything. A bitter laugh rose in my throat before I could stop it. I lost everything at 16.
We were wrong, he said.
The words dragged out like they hurt to say. About your art, about the way we treated you. I know it's too late to ask, but please, we're begging you. The word begging hung in the air between us, heavy with irony. They had once told me I'd come back begging. Now they were the ones on their knees, even if I couldn't see it. For a few seconds, I didn't speak. My mind replayed images, the door slamming in my face, the police station, the shredded canvases, my mother's tears in the cafe, the way they had tried to buy my silence. Then other images, my first solo show. The message from a fan who said my work gave them courage to leave an abusive home. The kid who showed up at my signing with paint-stained hands and said, my parents hate my art, too. But I'm not quitting. I walked to the window, looking out over the city that had become my real home. Here's the thing, I said slowly. I built this life without you. Every canvas, every paycheck, every sleepless night. You weren't there. You were the reason I had to fight this hard in the first place. My mother's voice trembled. We know and we're sorry. Truly. Can we at least see you?
Talk?
Try to fix things. My eyes stung, but I refused to let the tears fall. You want forgiveness now that you've lost everything, I murmured. Would you have called if you were still in that big house with your perfect reputation and your perfect lie? Silence answered me louder than words. I already knew the truth. I could have hung up. Let them drown in the consequences they'd poured on me first.
Part of me wanted to.
That part remembered every cruel sentence word for word. Another part, smaller but insistent, whispered that carrying this hatred forever would chain me to them just as tightly as obedience had. I took a deep breath. I'm not your safety net, I said. I won't be your bank. I won't erase what you did. Their breath caught, but I continued, surprising even myself. I also won't be the person who watches you die on principle. I'll have my lawyer contact the hospital about a payment plan. It'll go through a foundation, not my name. You won't get my forgiveness just because you're scared. That has to be earned slowly over time. And you may never fully get it, but you also won't be homeless because of me. My father started to speak, but I cut him off. This is not a reconciliation. This is me choosing not to become as cruel as you were. That's it. There was a ragged sob on the other end of the line. My mother, I think. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, Sarah. I ended the call before they could say anything else. My hands shook as I set the phone down, but there was a strange lightness in my chest, like a window had been cracked open in a room that had been sealed for too long. I walked back to the painting of the glowing phone and the woman by the window and picked up a brush. In the reflection on the glass screen, I added one tiny new detail. The faint outline of a door in the distance, not fully open, not fully closed. A possibility, not a promise. Because this was the truth. I hadn't gone back begging in a month. Instead, 11 years later, they were begging me to pick up, and I did, but on my terms. So, now I'll ask you the question that has haunted me since that first night. If the people who threw you out, who watched you break and called it discipline, showed up years later with empty hands and desperate eyes, would you open the door, or let them stand outside and feel the cold they once shoved you into? This new version reworks your original 7-part script into a darker, revenge-centered arc while keeping the core premise and emotional beats of Sarah's journey.